All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. This is that strange moment where we go from the green room with Elliot and Forrest, and suddenly I'm talking to a couple hundred people here tonight. So thank you all for joining us. Thanks to Eliot Weinberger for coming to us for his first virtual event. I feel so honored and touched. One of my favorite writers is coming to us tonight from this book-lined room in New York City. And of course, Forrest Gander, our more local friend. I'm so grateful for you both to join us and for everybody tuning in tonight. Hi, Mika. I see Mika Chu in the chat. And I see so many people in the chat. I just want to say hi. I see Paul Yamazaki and Jeff Deutsch and Emma Ramadan and so many people from across the country tuning in. One of the benefits of these events, the silver linings that I would not have expected or even thought of at the beginning of this year, is that the reach of our community could be so broad. We're a little bookstore about an hour northwest of San Francisco, and here we are looking at the roster of people kind of chiming in about where they're coming from, joining us tonight. So thank you all. We really appreciate that. This is our last virtual event of 2020, kind of a wild year. And the fact that we get to wrap it up with these two is great. So my job here is to quickly do an intro and get out of the way and let the conversation begin. And I'm going to start by introducing Forrest Gander, who is the author of numerous books of poetry, translation, fiction, and essays. Forrest has been a recipient of grants from the NEA. He's received a Guggenheim Fellowship and several Whiting Foundation Award. Of course, he won the Pulitzer Prize for Be With, his last collection of poetry. And his new collection of poems, I'm going to put a link in the chat, due out next May. I'm very excited about that. I've had a chance to hear maybe one or two poems now, Forrest, from this collection. Yeah. And so I'm going to strong arm Forrest, although I probably don't feel like I don't need to strong arm him into doing something with us down the line. Forrest, thank you for taking the time tonight. And of course, the reason for the occasion is Elliot Weinberger, who is one of my favorite writers. My wife and I were in New York a couple years ago, and we were at New Directions, kind of as a famous book expo party, RIP Book Expo. And across the room, I pointed out Elliot to my wife, and she said, "That's Elliot Weinberger." And I'm going to make the joke before Elliot does that she doesn't get out very much, I guess, because I know Elliot's going to be very self-deprecating. But it was quite an occasion for us to spend a little bit of time with Elliot then and get to know him. He came up to San Francisco, and we are honored to count you among our community. And for those of you who don't know, Elliot is an essayist, a political commentator, a translator, and editor. His books include Karmic Traces, An Elemental Thing, which was the book I discovered at City Lights, actually. Thank you, Paul Yamazaki, and which was named by the Village Voice as one of the 20 best books of the year when it was published. Elliot writes about politics for the London Review of Books and other publications, and has translated the poems of Beidou and others. And Elliot is that rare thing, a native and lifelong New Yorker. And so thank you for joining us tonight, Elliot. Forrest, I'm getting out of the way and letting you two take over. I will say quickly to everyone watching, there's a button below that says ask a question. I encourage you to plug in your questions there. I'll remind you throughout in the chat. But I will come back on later in the event, and we'll do some audience Q&A. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation between these two. It's going to be a lot of fun, and thank you both.
Okay. Thanks, Stephen. This is my first virtual event. I'm an analog kind of guy, but I'll do anything for Reyes bookstore, even humiliate myself. I'm getting an echo here.
Me too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll see.
Stephen, when you were on, there wasn't an echo.
But I'm coming back on. Do either of you have a second browser open? Elliot, do you happen to have two browsers open?
Yeah, because you made me do Chrome. Wait a minute. Let's see.
So mute the one that you're not on. If you
No,
hover,
I'm only on one browser. Let's see. Hang on a minute.
okay.
Oh, maybe I got the wrong one. Okay, let's try that.
That's better.
That works.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I will gracefully
Thank
disappear. Yeah.
Whoops. All right. Now I'm getting very weird mirror thing. Okay, no, it's fun. Okay, good. We're good.
All right.
Yeah.
You were going to say something, Elliot?
No, I just said that I just started out by saying that this is my first virtual event because I'm an analog kind of guy.
Right.
But I'll do anything for the Point Reyes bookstore, including humiliating myself, on the internet. So
Well, let's get on with that right away.
that's it. Yeah.
So also Stephen pointed to the chat button. There's also a button on screen where it says purchase Angels and Saints here. And that means it is books, which is right to get this book. So Elliot, right now you've got a best-selling book in Germany. You've had an opera based on your writing premiered around the world. James Laughlin, the editor of New Directions, publishers, perhaps America's most influential literary press, claimed that you were the best-read person he'd met since Ezra Pound. New York Times has called you one of the world's greatest essayists, even though you really retooled the essay and you've invented a new genre. You were the English language translator of Octavio Paz and accompanied him to the ceremony where he accepted the Nobel Prize. And with all of that promising future set up for you, you had to take on God and write a book about angels and saints. What were you thinking?
Well, yeah. It's funny I don't see you anymore, Forrest, but I see your icon. So it's a little distracting, but anyway. Yeah. So this book, like all things, started with Donald Trump. Really, as you mentioned, I write about politics for periodicals abroad, and about American politics. And because of that, I have to follow the minutia of the news, which kind of drives one crazy. So I like to have a project that's kind of timeless, and that's news that stays news, just to keep myself sane. So during the Iraq War is when I was writing that book, An Elemental Thing. I was just sort of I was so sick of reading, hearing about Bush that I needed to just go back into literally elemental things. And so on this book, what happened with this book was about 25 years ago, I wrote a 1-paragraph essay about the wings of angels, and which is now in the new book. And I thought, well, maybe I'll expand that a little bit. So I started researching angels, and then I fell into that rabbit hole, or I fell into the labyrinth of the Vatican basement, and I ended up spending 3 years there in the Catholic Church. I did not convert, however, in case anyone's worried, because one of the interesting things about angels is that almost everything we know about angels is not in the Bible. There's 200 mentions of angels in the Bible, but they mainly just act, or they're mentioned in passing, and the Bible really tells you nothing about who they are, what they're like, even what they look like, really. I mean, in those kind of ethereal winged creatures that we know from the history of Western art, they're not in the Bible. In the Bible, the angels tend to look like young men. In fact, two angels go with Abraham to Sodom to look for a just man, and the Sodomites find them so cute they try to seduce them. So basically everything that about angels comes after the Bible was written, and for centuries, for many centuries, they're debating and elucidating all of these things about the angels. And what's most curious about it is they're obsessed with the material reality of these ethereal creatures, unlike any other religion in the world. I mean, Hindus don't really worry about how Krishna became blue, or how if you have four arms, you brush your teeth and things like that. But the church was obsessed with questions like do angels eat, and if they're incorporeal beings, do they actually can they actually speak? How do they communicate with each other? How do they communicate with humans? Do they have any individual identity? Are they aware of each other? Do they have a free will? Do they have a memory? All these kinds of questions. And the great text on this is Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century has this 3,000-page book called the Summa Theologica, where he lays out in excruciating detail all of these questions, where he does the pros and cons of, like, do angels eat? And so all the reasons why they do eat, all the reasons why they don't eat, and then he comes to his summary of that. So it's all pretty crazy stuff. And then, of course, since I was researching angels, then there's always lots of saints around, and I ended up getting into the saints. There's literally 10,000 saints, and so I started. I have an encyclopedia of all the saints, and so I was going through all of them, and then seeing who would be of interest, and then from there, researching the individuals to see if there's something I could do with them. So that's how I ended up. So it was 3 years, and I ended up with a very short book.
Why don't you read the first paragraph of the book, Elliot?
Okay.
Give me a taste of it.
Okay. Now, Forrest told me I have to read in such a way that you just don't see the top of my forehead. So I'm not sure how you do this exactly, but I'll try. So this is just the first paragraph. When armed men come to arrest Jesus, one of his followers draws a sword and cuts off the ear of a high priest's servant. Jesus tells him to put down his sword. Quote, "Do you think I cannot now pray to my Father, who would presently give more than 12 legions of angels?" A Roman legion at the time had 5,000 men, but Origen of Alexandria in the 3rd century revealed that a heavenly legion has 6,666 angels. 12 such angels would have been a modest portion of what the Bible calls heaven's army. Revelation states that there are, quote, 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of angels. Hebrews merely says they are innumerable. Bernardino of Siena in the 15th century said there are more angels than stars in the sky, grains of sand on the beaches, or all corporeal things. 14th century Kabbalists, turning words into numbers, calculated that there are exactly 301,722. Although the Zohar says that 600 million were created on the second day of creation and others afterwards. Marsilio Ficino in the 15th century, expanding Origen, said that there are indeed 6,666 angels per legion, and also 6,666 legions per order and 9 orders, but that the total number, which otherwise would be 399,920,004, remains incalculable. One of the largest estimates is in the apocryphal book 3 Enoch, where each of the 7 archangels leads 496,000 myriads, and each myriad has 10,000 angels. 34,720,000,000 angels in all. William Cross in the 18th century simply said, quote, "'Tis beyond the power of arithmetic to compute them." Others have wondered how angels, being incorporeal, could be counted.
Sweet. Yeah, so it turns out, as we read, that a great deal of the historical discussion about angels has to do with mathematics and logic. Can you talk a little bit about the relation between faith and the obsession with scientific verification, even among the most religious and saintly theologians?
You're kidding. Thanks a lot, Forrest.
Well, let me connect it.
No, I mean,
Let me connect it to another.
Okay, thank you.
So
Forrest. I thought you were going to ask me easy questions, you know. No, I mean,
Like
there is a lot. I mean, there's there's a lot of there's a lot of scientific things that they try to resolve. For example, angels can sort of what we would call teleport themselves from one place to another. They come to heaven, earth, immediately. They kind of beam down, like Star Trek. So there is a question that Aquinas posed, which is when an angel teleports like that from say point A to point C, does the angel cross point B, or does it just go instantly to the other?
It's like
What?
particle physics. He's
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I don't know that it's so scientific. I mean, if we're talking about the world, actually, I mean, what's curious about modernity is that we have created incredible instruments for measuring and understanding the universe, and the result has been that the universe is much more inexplicable and incomprehensible than it was. I mean, Dante's universe is a complete there's no questions about Dante's universe. I mean, Dante's universe is entirety, whereas our universe is, for starters, is 95% dark matter, which we know nothing about. So actually, the curious thing is that as the science becomes so much better, the world becomes so much more mysterious. But this has nothing to do with this book, but that's okay.
Well, it does, though, and I think it maybe has to do with language, also language itself, because so there's all this debate about what it might mean to refer to the tongues of angels if angels don't have actual bodies. And a lot of discussion about that sort of thing. And I thought the implications of your book go beyond theology to our relation with language itself. And I wanted to ask you if you'd say that the many contradictory assertions that you cite in your book make clear that it's been very difficult historically to reveal truth through literal interpretations of language, even the language of saints and angels. In some ways, it's a book about, in many ways, about translation.
No, it's not. Why is it about translation? I don't think. Well, I don't know. There's this thing now that everything's about translation, but I'm not so sure about translation. I mean, where the translation really occurs is with the saints, because in Catholicism, the translation is the moving of the relics of one saint from one church to another, and that was known as the translation of the relics. But I'm not sure that I follow this
Well,
point.
I was thinking,
maybe I'm a little slow here.
If the angels speaking God's word are speaking truth with a capital T, in the translation into human language, it becomes indecipherable what they're saying. That's discussion.
Yeah, I mean, there's this problem of when angels speak, are they just speaking God's word, or are they coming up with things that they themselves are saying? And then there's also this question of how angels speak. And so Augustine said that they assume a human body so that they can communicate with us. There's also this question about what are the names of the angels, because there's only really 4 angels that are named in the Bible, 3 really in the Bible. And so the question is, do all the other angels have names? Some people said, well, they have names, but they're too complicated for humans to understand. And then there's a long tradition, which I get into in the book, of like kind of creating angels for all different kinds of things that you want the angels to protect you from. So, and they all have names, but of course they've all been given names later on, So, Meister Eckhart said you can call Gabriel's name probably wasn't Gabriel; it could have been Conrad. This is his example. Konrad, it's better in German. But we have no idea. We've just given him that name.
So one of the saints is also an angel, and you quote Saint Loyola, who uses this very curious word in his description of Saint Francis. Saint Francis, he writes, was really an angel, quote, alembicated into the human viscera. This, I assume, is a very beautiful act to which others listening might aspire. What would it mean to be alembicated into human viscera?
Well, it's sort of when we get off the screen and then become human again, So,
and thinking about viscera and the visceral, I wondered if I could get you to read that beautiful short paragraph on page 67 about bodies.
Yeah, well, this was actually the one. This is my. Thank you for giving me the page. I've never found it otherwise. This was the one paragraph essay that started off this whole book. It's now the last part of the essay on angels, and this was the one that I decided to expand, and then it turned into this book. So it was actually written, I don't know, 25 years ago or so. In most cultures, a corpse is laid on its back, and gravity pulls the fluids down, giving the upper sections their waxy pallor. The lower sections darken as the blood settles, except in those places where the body is touching the surface on which it is laid. There, the pressure of the weight of the corpse pushes the blood from the tissue, forming areas that are much lighter than the rest. One of those areas is across the shoulder blades and upper back, and it takes the form of perfectly symmetrical wings. The Cathars believe that humans are fallen angels, trapped in a material body because of the sin of the rebellion.
That's
okay. Well, I mean, this also gets into the, like, how much of a body do angels really have? And the great one for that is Milton's Paradise Lost. I mean, because Paradise Lost, I mean, basically the whole revolt of the angels is about 3 sentences in the book of Revelations, and 1 or 2 passing references elsewhere. So there's no real account of this whole rebellion of the angels and Satan and all of that. But Milton takes those 3 lines and extrapolates it into this gigantic poem, Paradise Lost. But in Paradise Lost, I mean, not only do the angels eat, they have digestive systems, and the angels have sex too. And not only do they have sex, but they're gender fluid. They can turn from one gender into another. So all of these things, I can't really recommend Paradise Lost as a racy book, but the in this context, I mean, Ezra Pound said it was unreadable, but that was a little extreme. But it's still he has a completely different take on all of these.
So it might be worthwhile to tell the audience a little bit about the structure of this book. So on the opening first pages, we encounter examples of the 9th century figure poems, which we'll discover are distributed all through the book. Then there's a sequence of assertions about angels. In the 5th section of that sequence, the reportage suddenly breaks into lyric, this sort of gorgeous stepped poem that identifies the most salient qualities of a bevy of angels. After that, there's section 2, the saints, which includes these curiously particular summations of the lives of Christian saints, which I'll ask you about a little bit later. And there's 2 chapters on animals, and the book ends with a section on the afterlife, and then a guide to the illustrations. I wonder if you had any sort of model for the book. I mean, Robert Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy occurred to me, but so did Moby Dick. Did the structure gradually take shape? And at what point did you know you wanted to include those incredible 9th century so-called figure poems of Brabus Morris? And will you talk about them?
Yeah. No, I can't say it's modeled on Moby Dick. Boy, I wish it were. By the way, there's lots of interesting questions keep popping. I'm sorry, I keep getting distracted. I'm really not used to this. I keep getting distracted by all of these questions that are popping up that are quite good. Somebody just asked about Islamic angels. I just deal mainly with Christian angels, and then a couple of references to Jewish angels. One of which I got completely wrong, according to Peter Cole, but that's okay. And the Islamic, I mean, Islam tended to the Islamic angels tend to be much more abstract, and there's a lot of wonderful Sufist things on the angels, but they're more like beings of light, and they're not like these material Christian angels. Okay, structure of the book. No, basically, I wrote it, and then Christine Burgin, who does wonderful, beautiful books, some of them with new directions, like the Emily Dickinson poems book, and Susan Howe and the Robert Walser books, asked me if I wanted to do a book with her. Of course, I was thrilled to death. And then we got Leslie Miller, who's a fabulous designer, to design the book. And so Christine and Leslie, of course, wanted artwork. And so I started researching that, and actually the best place for researching that these days is Instagram, because you know, besides all the people who Instagram about their fabulous lifestyles, you have these so-called Instagram art curators, because all of the libraries, the major libraries and the museums have digitalized all of their holdings, or so much of their holdings. And then you have these people who specialize in certain things, and they just post Instagram. So if you're looking for medieval manuscripts, there are these people out there who just post medieval manuscripts. So I started going through lots of those. Then I discovered the Rabanus Maurus manuscript. And then from there, I started researching. First of all, they'll have one image from a certain manuscript, and then I would go to that library, the Bibliothèque Nationale, or wherever, and go through the whole manuscript. And then there's actually 80 Rabanus Maurus manuscripts. So I started trying to track down as many of those that had been digitalized. And then
Do you want to tell people?
Oh yeah. So sorry. These are maybe I can show you an example if you haven't seen it. They're almost like tantric drawings that let's see, is this visible? I can't see. Is that visible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So they have grid poems. They're almost like word searches that they're poems within poems, and all different ways of reading them. And let me find a good one here. So they're like this, you see. Whoa. You can't really see, but they're very beautiful, and the reproduction is incredible in this book. So they're poems, they're devout poems that can be read many, many ways. So then I thought I needed some sort of explanation or explication of the poems. So I started researching that, and I discovered that there was a very good article about a exhibition at the British Museum on medieval manuscripts, and it had a few paragraphs on the Rabanus Maurus manuscripts, and it was written by Mary Wellesley, who had turned out as a very close friend of my son-in-law, and who I'd actually met a couple of times. And so I just wrote her and asked her if she would do that. And so the explanation in the end is a guide to the illustrations by Mary, and she unpacks all of these how to read all of these things. So it's good.
So you mentioned that with the saints, as the saints come marching into the second part of your book, they sort of are different kinds of biographies than we've seen before. You decided to handle many of the saint biographies the way that the brilliant comedian Stephen Wright handles jokes, which is as one-liners.
Don't they all do one-liners? I don't know.
All his jokes are one-liners.
Really? I don't know. Yeah.
So was this your instinctual poetic inclination towards condensation, dicten equals condensare, or were you thinking about the rhythm of the book as a whole? Again, sort of an structure idea.
Yeah, well, I like really short biographies, and I've done quite a few over the years where I kind of do like a 3-page biography, and then I realized that for many, so in the book it's kind of a mixture. I think the longest is maybe 3 or 4 pages, and then there's lots of one line biographies, because often I just like to take the one little detail from something and use that to stand. One-liners, the inspiration is also, you know, how our friend Hiroaki Sato translates haiku in one line. And then the Felix Fénéon novels in 3 lines, you know that book, which is a, you know, series of, they're all novels, but they're all 3 lines long. So so I love the idea of writing one line biographies. So there's about, I don't know, there must be about 100 of them in the book.
So one of the things that you do that's sort of difficult is handling a mix of tones, Elliot, that you mix the tragically dramatic, as in the biographical note on Francis Doctera, this Polish priest who died from medical experiments performed on him at Dachau, and then a lot of the absurdly dramatic, as in the biographical note of one fire-breathing Hashmal who incinerated a student as he was reading the book of Ezekiel, though no one knows why. Going back and forth between comedic and disturbing. How are you thinking of the tone adjusting?
I guess I was thinking of life. I don't know.
Yeah, it does have a way of being that. So
yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it's yeah.
It can be hard to insert something serious between 2 comedic passages and not diminish it, right?
I guess so, but that's you know, that's I hadn't thought about this at all, actually. So I'll have to think about that. I mean, the probably I just can't help myself, but the it's, you know, the stories of the saints are as varied as humanity, and so you have, you know, you have things that are kind of wondrous, you have things that are mundane, you have, of course, terribly tragic ones with the various martyrs and so forth and so on. And it gets really crazy when you get into the 20th century, because, or in modern times in general, because until modern times, there aren't all that many saints. There's, I don't know, something like 700 or so. And then in the modern era, they kind of go crazy on canonizing people. And that's how we ended up with 10,000 saints now. And the last biography in the book is this completely wacky Italian woman who teleports. Actually, the church uses the word bilocates to Stalin's bedroom and tries to convert him, and then she talks to Mussolini in purgatory.
Yeah.
And then I think this is the same one who when she.
That's Lidwina of Schiedam.
What?
Lidwina of Schiedam.
and then Jesus does her laundry for her and things like that, you know. And then she's a serious saint.
I think she's the one that reminds you of Lovecraft that you say.
Oh no, that's somebody else. Yeah, whose prose reminded me of Lovecraft. You know?
She also visits purgatory.
Yeah, purgatory. Well, purgatory is interesting because purgatory, I think, is invented in the 11th century. You know, there's no purgatory in the Bible, so this is quite amazing, also. You know, so basically, I mean, a lot of the action happens after the Bible. So then there's a problem of, if you're a fundamentalist, what do you do with all of the things that were revealed after the Bible? There's also a problem if you're a fundamentalist. Are you going to keep slaves? And if you're Jewish, are you going to sacrifice rams and things like that?
Yeah. Do you want to show the audience that ram in the cage behind you?
Yes, I have one. I'm keeping it for Christmas. Little sacrifice.
Why don't you read a little saint section, maybe the short biography of Juan Garin,
Okay.
page 87.
Oh, thank you. Okay. I think I need a glasses change. Actually, I'm going to read the one of Tekla because I like that one.
All right.
Tekla is one of the earliest saints. She lived in Turkey in the 1st century, and she is she existed historically. I mean, she wasn't invented. She was soon to be married, but as she sat by the window sewing, she heard a voice coming from the house next door. Blessed are those who have kept the flesh chaste, for they will become a temple of God. Blessed are those who are self-controlled, for God will speak to them. Blessed are those who have wives, as if they did not have them. It was Paul, who had come to her city. She could not see him, but she sat for days listening, transfixed by his preaching. Her mother and her fiancé could not get her to move from the window. Next door, a mob of men formed, angry that their wives and daughters were entranced by this message of chastity. Paul was arrested. She escaped from her house, bribed a guard to let her into the prison, and spent the night in his cell, listening to his words and kissing his chains. They were discovered and taken before the governor. Her mother denounced her. Burn the one who will not be a bride. Then all the wives who have been taught by this one will fear. Paul was beaten and sent out of the city, but she was taken to the arena, stripped naked and placed on a pyre. The flames rose, then were doused by a sudden cloudburst of rain and hail. The people scattered. She was unharmed. He left the city, found Paul on the road, and asked to be baptized. He told her to be patient. They traveled together to Antioch. A nobleman, taken with her beauty, tried to buy her from Paul. When this was refused, he assaulted her. She resisted, tore his mantle, and knocked off his crown. For this humiliation of an important man, she was led to another governor and condemned to the arena to be eaten by wild animals. A lioness ran up to her, but lay at her feet. A bear tried to attack her, but was killed by the lioness. A lion charged, and both lion and lioness died in the struggle. There was a large pool of hungry seals, and she threw herself into it, declaring that if no man would do it, she would baptize herself. Lightning struck and killed the seals. The women in the arena threw nard and cassia and cardamom into the ring, and all the remaining animals fell asleep. She was released and went looking for Paul. When she finally found him, he sent her off to preach. She was 18 and went to live in a cave, performing miracles. Storms were quelled, brigands met divine justice, temples of the great Greek gods were destroyed, and many were cured of incurable afflictions. The local doctors, nearly driven out of business by her miraculous cures, decided that the source of her power was her virginity. By now she was 90 and had lived in the cave for 72 years. They hired some drunken thugs to rape her. A passage opened in the rock. She walked in, the rock closed behind her, and she was never seen again. Her shrine attracted crowds of pilgrims. In the 5th century, an author whose name is unknown was writing a book that recounted her life and the many miracles she had performed while alive and after her death. He came to him almost every night to supply him with the details. When his finger became infected and he couldn't write, he healed it. He tells how he had become neglectful, lazy, unable to continue. He appeared, picked up his notes and read them, smiling with approval, and told him to finish the book. So we all need one of those.
Yeah, that's partly autobiographical.
Yes, absolutely.
So we're getting towards the end, and I want to hear audience questions, but let me ask you one last one about, to kind of bring us back to poetry. So you used the expression just a little while ago, because I can't help myself. And also, because you can't help yourself, I suppose you managed to make a lot of delightful literary connections in the most unexpected places, connecting the lines in the history of poetry, for instance, by the great German poet Rilke to the pseudo-Dionysius. Saint Teresa is called the Emily Dickinson of the Roman Catholic sainthood. Saint Augustine,
Not by me.
you say his writing, right, but you quote it. You say his writing anticipates Gertrude Stein syntactically. And in that hagiography of Ludwina de Schiedam, who visits purgatory, you say that hagiography reminds you of Lovecraft. But would you comment on sort of the most central of these, which is Rilke's Duino elegies and his promise that every angel is terrifying? And maybe tell us a little bit about purgatory. You started to already.
Yeah, no, the
origins of the angelic order.
Yeah, no, the Rilke. Let me just find this here. Give me a minute.
Maybe 51.
What?
51 in your book?
Yeah, I got it. So let me just read you the because it's about the most famous line in poetry, one of the most famous lines in modern poetry, and this is in the Duino Castle in January 1912, recorded by his host, Princess Marie von Thurn und Taxis. You know, Rilke was one of the great freeloaders of all time, and he was always staying in these fabulous mansions. And I've actually visited Duino, the Duino Castle, and you can, you know, it's outside of Trieste, and you can see you can sit on the bench where Rilke wrote the Duino elegies, and you're on this beautiful stone bench with a beautiful stone table on a cliff overlooking the sea. I mean, if you sat there, Forrest, you could write the Duino elegies too, you know.
I've visited, so yeah.
You've been there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Duino elegy.
You're probably I don't know. You're actually a better poet than Rilke, Forrest, but that's another story. Okay. Because, you know, Rilke is too abstract after the first book. But anyway, so here's her diary. Rilke climbed down to the bastions, which, jutting to the east and west, were connected to the foot of the castle by a narrow path along the cliffs. These cliffs fall steeply for about 200 feet into the sea. Rilke paced back and forth, deep in thought. Then, all at once, in the midst of his brooding, he halted suddenly, for it seemed to him that in the raging of the storm, a voice had called to him. Wer, wenn ich schreie, hörte mich denn aus der Engel Ordnungen? Who, if I cried out, would hear me among the angelic orders? Now, what interests me about that is that the angelic orders is completely the invention of this guy Pseudo-Dionysius in the 5th century. Well, nobody knows exactly who he is, but he's the one that came up with this idea that that there's this hierarchy. In fact, he invented the word hierarchy of 3 orders of 3 angels each. And he gave them all names and so forth and so on. And Pseudo-Dionysius is a guy who pretended to be uh, Dionysius from the Bible, who makes a walk-on in the Bible, who meets St. Paul. But he's an unknown guy in maybe around the 5th century. And so the idea that this, which then this whole idea of the order of the angels gets kind of generally accepted, but the idea that sort of, one of the most famous lines of modern poetry is based on this kind of, what can you call it? I mean, it's based on this complete invention of this one guy who was probably a Syrian monk, and so the order of the angels that cry out to Rilke, it's kind of like, I guess, the Keats poem. Yeah, it's not exactly like the Keats poem of having Cortez standing in Panama, when it was actually, Balboa, but it's still that this great poetic invention is also based on another invention, or this vision is based on another invention, is great. And Pseudo Dionysius is a great character. I kind of give his biography too, because he also refers to all these other books that he wrote, which turned out to be completely a lie also. Like it's not that the books are lost, that the books were never invented, were never written. And so he refers to all of these other works of his. So he's one of these amazing characters.
Thanks.
Okay. So where are we now? There's Stephen. Hello, Stephen.
I've returned. I've also made a scenery setting change here to get closer to my wireless router.
Oh yeah.
There are some questions. Are you willing to answer some questions here from the audience?
Yeah, sure, of course.
All right. So Sandy asked in the chat here, what was the earliest reference to angels that you found? Do you remember?
No, I guess it's in the Bible there. Sorry, I just spilled my water here. Okay. Yeah, I mean, the earliest is in the Old Testament, I think, pretty much. So I mean, it depends what your definition of angels are, because a lot of this stuff also comes from the Zoroastrians and from especially in the Old Testament, there's a lot of adaptation of Mesopotamian things, and so a lot of the creatures in Genesis are really Mesopotamian winged creatures. So it's kind of hard to put a timeline on exactly when, what's the earliest person that's an angel. The cherubim are really Mesopotamian creatures, and in the Bible they're not originally angels at all.
That kind of ties into a question from Eleni, and she says, "I wonder what you think or discovered about the bodily theriomorphic aspect of angels."
The what?
Theriomorphic, winged. I guess winged. You mentioned winged angels. When did that become a part? I mean, you said Mesopotamian. Is that where sort of the winged aspect comes from?
Yeah, no, I mean, you get into this problem with the seraphim. The seraphim have wings. The cherubim have wings, but the description, because Ezekiel goes to heaven and meets the cherubim, but then he has 3 different descriptions of what they look like. They have 4 faces and what the 4 faces are, and they have 6 wings. But basically, that kind of image that we have of beautiful, young women or babies or something with wings. That's not in the Bible at all.
All right. Maybe here we'll throw in an easy one. Someone asks if Charles Reznikoff's testimony was an inspiration at all for your saint biography.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Reznikov is an inspiration for everything that I do. You know, one of the things I learned from Reznikov and from Larry Niedecker was how to take a lot of information and condense it into you know, one very small piece of writing. And it's definitely yeah, I'm always thinking about Charles Reznikoff. And he's definitely an inspiration in how to write simply. And also, you know, one of the most important things that Reznikoff was trained as a lawyer, said that that, you know, a line of poetry has to be as tight as a legal brief. And in everything that I write, I try to follow that idea of well, what's the argument against what you just wrote? And, you know, are you being absolutely as clear as possible? So I think I learned that from Rezi.
Was that a Stephen Fredman question?
Hi,
Yeah.
Stephen Fredman. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hello, Stephen Fredman. I haven't heard from you in about 20 years, though.
That's great. A question here from Addison, who asks sort of a research question. Can you talk a little bit, Ellie, can you talk a little bit about your methods when you begin a new project, especially when working with sources and languages you don't speak? Do you rely on secondary scholarship? Also, any comment on the general absence of citations in your work?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't really, you know, I'm not writing academic books, so, and I don't like footnotes, so, you know, it's not that kind of book. I don't think that there's any original scholarship in my book. I depend on academic scholars, and in this book, on original text. Actually, since we're here, hang on 1 minute. Since we're in a virtual bookstore, I decided I would recommend a few books that I thought were particularly useful when I was doing this book, and then you can order them from Stephen. The first one is a wonderful book on the saints with a horrible title, which is called "Why Can the Dead Do Such Great Things?" You see that? By Robert Bartlett, published by Princeton, and it's a 700-page book on the saints, and it's basically on the miracles that the saints perform after their death. And the title, "Why Can the Dead Do Such Great Things?" is actually a line from Augustine. And Bartlett is a extremely lively, I mean, he's an academic, extremely lively writer, and I recommend him. Another book which surprised me, it's published by Oxford, Angels and Angelology in the Middle Ages. Let's hold this up.
I wish I could say that we had this on the shelf at the store right
Yeah,
now.
I'm sure you have these stocked all the time there in Port Reyes. By David Keck, K-E-C-K. And he is also extremely good. I mean, you know, most of these academic books are horribly dull. But he's an unusually good writer. And then something that you might have is for the source material, there's this series published by the Paulist Press, which is called The Classics of Western Spirituality. And they now have, it's been going for decades, has hundreds of books. They have hideous covers. This one is Catherine of Siena. And you have to get past the ugly covers. They have usually excellent translations and introductions of all of these texts. Catherine of Siena was the one who had long dialogues with God himself, which she transcribed. God spends a lot of the time complaining that nobody understands him and that they neglect him. And Catherine of Siena was also the one who, when she married Jesus, the way all nuns do, Jesus gave her a wedding ring made from his foreskin, but luckily it was invisible. So,
That's Molly.
So those were books. I mean, the other thing about research is that it's very interesting that religions that have a long monastic tradition are very good about putting really good information on the internet. So, for example, because they come from this tradition of transcribing manuscripts and so forth. So, Tibetan Buddhism is wonderful for the kind of material that's available on the internet, and Catholicism is great. I mean, the hagiographies of all the saints, all this stuff is all on the internet. Whereas Hinduism is terrible. It's kind of, incomprehensible stuff most of the time. So, but for going to the actual source text, the internet is unusually is a terrific resource.
How about a couple more? I'm not going to let you go just yet.
Okay, I'm here. I'm fine. We're deep in the American night here in New York. Yeah. That's fine.
Someone asked, Charles asked, on the kind of going back to the topic of those one-line biographies. He references the Sahara chapter in Elemental Thing.
Right.
He asks, I'm wondering if such single-line distillations come out of longer things cut down, or if they begin as a one line.
No, they're only one line. I mean, I went. Well, I've been to the Sahara a number of times now, but that was after the first time I went to the Sahara. It's in an Elemental Thing, and I kind of wanted a T-shirt that said I went to the Sahara and all I got was this one-line essay, but no, they don't. I mean, I have a very curious way of writing, which is I think. Most writers write a lot and then cut things down, whereas I write very little and then keep adding things to it. So it grows in a kind of organic way. I mean, I want to say like a crystal, but I'm not pretending to be crystalline. So I basically will start off with a few sentences and then I keep adding, but not just at the end, in the beginning, the middle, and so forth. So that the text actually builds and builds and builds. And I almost never cut anything. I mean, sometimes there'll be a false start. Sometimes, I rewrite and I continually rewrite and I change things, but I actually don't cut anything.
All right.
And from our journeys together, Elliot, I remember that you also never got a notebook and never made notes, except.
Yeah, I mean, I have this problem that I can't read my own handwriting, so I've never kept a notebook, and I'm also probably lazy. So, whereas you're very good, Forrest, at noting everything. So, I wonder how much you actually go back to the notebook. So, yeah, do you use them a lot?
Yeah, they're my material. But if I had a memory like yours, I wouldn't, bother with them.
What were we just talking about?
Yeah.
Well, here's another one from Dagan Miller, who was I mentioned earlier in the green room, who wrote a great book called This Radical Land. And he said, for a few years, I've been imagining a conversation between you, Elliot, and John DeGata. One of the things I still appreciate about your writing is that all the facts are verifiable, but your nonfiction doesn't work like other people's. I'd love to hear you think out loud about the possibilities and limits of facts.
No, I don't think they have any limits. That's my one rule of writing an essay, is that all the information is independently verifiable. So it's not that it's necessarily true or not true, but somebody believed it, not me. And I don't invent anything. Can I say this about John DeGatte's book? I mean, he got so much publicity about the book about the fact checker. And then I met him. I mean, he's a wonderful person. I met him and I said, why, how come nobody's realized that you completely made up this story about the fact checker? And he said, yeah, can't figure out why no one's ever noticed that, because that story is completely made up. There is a guy who was a fact checker, but the guy obviously did not spend a year checking how many motels there are in Las Vegas and things like that. So that whole story is a complete fiction.
Just a curious note with John DeGatte too. He was a student of mine at Iowa, where we read Eliot Weinberger. And
oh yeah, okay. So that's what messed up his mind, I guess. You know, no, but he's been wonderful in his. He's been wonderful in his promotion of the essay and everything, and this. I'm not so sure I believe in this category called the lyrical essay, but that's something else again, because I think there's this tendency to include everything as an essay. I mean, in the idea, I mean, his defense is, well, you have things that are poetic prose. Why can't you have essayistic poetry? So he puts in, William Blake, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, and Christopher Smart's My Cat Jeffrey and everything, which I think are poems, and I don't think that they're essays, but who cares about the genres? I mean, a lot of people think that, or some people think that my essays are poems, but I think they're essays, so who knows?
All right, maybe one more, but I'm going to ask you first, Elliot. When's the last time you smoked at an event?
Smoked what?
When's the last time you smoked during an event? One of your readings?
No, I was going to ask you permission, whether that's okay, and whether in virtual Point Reyes you're allowed to smoke or not,
It must have been the early 90s somewhere,
So actually, I have this problem that smoking is giving me up, because thanks to capitalism, they've discontinued this fabulous Nat Shermans, which I've been addicted to for many decades, and they got bought by Marlboro, and then one of those consulting companies told them they weren't making enough money, so they're now there's no more left. So I thought I would use this occasion to enjoy my last Nat Shermans there. So you never know.
Well,
someone's asking me, what kind of cigarettes are you smoking now?
Now we're getting to the heart of the.
You can't buy these at Point Reyes bookstore.
All right, maybe one more before we go, and this is a pretty interesting question here. From where are we at?
This is like talk radio, isn't it? I mean, it's like, well, we've got Chuck in Grand Rapids.
Yeah, long time.
Kind of amazing.
Where did this go? I think maybe it was in the. It was basically. I'm going to paraphrase because I think I've lost it somewhere here. It was asking about the significance of these square poems that you made reference to and that are included in the book. Is there any sort of, is that a beyond what you include, or maybe just in what you included? And you mentioned the sort of notes in the back. What is the significance of the square? Is there a significance of the square?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I mean, they're grid poems, so they're kind of like concrete poems. 1,000 some odd years before concrete poetry. So they're all within this. They're all on very specific grids. So those are all letters there that you can see in the background. They're all on very specific grids. There's all kinds of numerological significance to those, the number of letters per grid, and then the the number of letters that are inside the actual designs. But that's all explained in the back end. So you have to read the book. What can I say?
Well, it's late for you, although you told me you're on West Coast time, just physiologically. But
yeah, no, I always say that I'm a Pacific Coast person trapped in an East Coast body, you know. So.
Well, I'm glad that you could join us on Pacific time tonight. This was really wonderful. Thank you, Forrest, for taking the time to do this. Elliot, we'll just do this once a week now that you've gotten the hang of it, you know.
Oh, I could have a regular show? You mean not
It's dream.
Yeah, we're gonna work in like the traffic update on the 9s or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to everyone for joining us tonight, for kind of wrapping up a hell of a year, 2020. Not that anything is going to change as we go into 2021, but this is a really special way to conclude our virtual event series for the year. And keep an eye out. You can follow us on Crowdcast or our newsletter for more of these. And Elliot, thank you again. This has been a real pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks, Forrest.
Thanks, Elliot.
Thanks. Nice to see you.
Thanks, everyone, and good night. And we'll see you in the new year.
All right. See you soon, Steve.
Okay. Bye.
Yeah.